Zion, you want to learn about how to time an N20 motor? You do? Okay, let's do it. Good boy. Hey everyone, so last week we checked timing. We found that the timing on this N20 was slightly off. Today we're going to pull off the intake and exhaust Vanos units, including the central valves. Now you would do this if you had a bad Vanos unit that you proved was bad by swapping the solenoids, and potentially, if you wanted to do all the work, you could swap the central valves to see if the fault migrates to either the intake or the exhaust. The central valves on an N20, which are the central bolts, are not one-time use, so you can reuse them. You know, a lot of people are intimidated to work on internal engine stuff, but with some great videos and some basic coaching, and if you are meticulous and you're careful, you can actually do all of this work yourself. And it's really rewarding and fun, and it never hurts to learn something new. So if you get the chance, give it a try. Next week's video, the plan is to pull off the Valvetronic eccentric shaft. And I'm going to show you a trick where you don't need to touch any of the springs and you don't need to purchase another special tool. There's a trick that I can show you how to replace the eccentric shaft when you're replacing the Valvetronic motor. If you need to know how to replace the Valvetronic motor, I have a video on that and I'll put it right up in the corner for you. All right everyone, I'm excited to show you this process. Thank you to all my subscribers and all of my recent subscribers. I really appreciate you joining me on my channel. If you can, like, subscribe, and share. Just trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. And that's my short-term goal. Long-term goal, obviously, would be great to have 1 million subscribers, but let's just start with 100,000, shall we? So stick around, a lot of awesome, fun content, and we're gonna be tearing down this N20 engine. All right, let's get into this. So to catch up where we left off, I'll put a link in the corner for the previous video where we checked timing, and I went over the special tools that you're gonna need with a tool recommendation for a certain kit that has all the great tools that you're going to need to set timing. So we are at TDC. As a quick recap, our camshaft is at TDC because there's a barcode right here, and there's also a barcode on the intake camshaft. And our timing we found was slightly off because I could not put these locks on, and these pickup wheels in the front with the additional timing tool that you need, which is right here, did not lock into place correctly. So our timing was slightly off on this N20. We also are at TDC. I just used this zip tie to make sure that I was at TDC correctly. And on the passenger side, or the left-hand side as facing the engine, is where the access hole is for your pin for TDC. And here's that pin installed, and here's it going into the flex plate right here, locking me at TDC. All right, so you need a 24mm socket for the Vanos central bolt, and you need a 27 for the chain tensioner. Now you need all these timing tools here in place, and if you need to know how to set this up, see the previous video, because when we loosen the central valves, the camshaft is free to move. We can use the tool to move the camshaft, or we can use a wrench to move the camshaft. But first, let's now loosen the central bolt first. You notice that your pickup wheel will spin. I'm going to loosen also the intake side now. Okay, so both of these are now loose. And if you were only correcting timing, I can now correct my timing on both sides. So I can move that, and I can move this to line up my bolts. And my camshaft is now free to move to correct the timing. All right, this is what it looks like from the side view. And you want to start your bolts. You can see here I'm still at an angle. That's just because of the spring tension. So if I turn my camshaft by hand, I can get the tension off that I need to put the bolts in to hold the camshaft correctly to set my timing. So I'm starting it all by hand. I want to screw it all the way down, and I want to tighten these to 8 Newton meters, not 10 Newton meters like last time. Everything was 10. These bolts here for the tool and for the main bracket are all 8 Newton meters. All right, I'm going to snug these down to 8 Newton meters. Click, click. That's 8 Newton meters, close enough. Now, if you're just setting your timing, you would just put these on. You'd set your ring to the correct location, and you'd use this tool right here. So we went ahead and locked our camshafts at TDC. That is step 1. This tool here has these two pegs on them, right? So I need that to be loose enough. And then I would install the tool here, and I would just set up my rings so that these 2 nubs will go into these pickup wheels on both sides. It's such a simple process, guys. It's surprisingly simple. One there and one right there. Okay. Then I would bolt that down, and then I would tighten my central bolts up correctly. But for this video, I'm going to pull the Vanos units out, and we're going to go through the full steps of removing and reinstalling the Vanos units. So I'll take this back off for now. This is all being held, and we have our TDC pin still in. I do need to take out the chain tensioner. All right, let's go ahead and take this out. See, there wasn't a lot of torque on that. You will lose oil. Of course, right, look at that. It leaks right into the water pump connector, of course. Let's take a look at this cool tensioner that they have. It works off of oil pressure. All right, so here is the tensioner for the timing chain. And you want to check it to see how much tension it has. It shouldn't just be collapsing. And this can get a little weaker when it loses its oil pressure, but you just want to make sure you feel that it has good spring tension. So this does work off of oil pressure also, right? So that now, if you look, my timing chain, let me show you up the top. So now my timing chain, you can see it has slack. This is what you'd feel through your oil fill cap, right? If your timing chain was starting to stretch, or if you had an issue with a broken guide, you'll get in there and you'll find that your timing chain is loose like this. But you can see how much slop I have. So now I can go ahead and with the tension off, these central bolts, they come right out. So there's the central bolt for the exhaust side. These are swappable from intake and exhaust. The units themselves are not swappable. Keep that in mind though. So you want to check and you want to just take a look at these. Are any of these ports full of any kind of swarf or metal filings? If you do see metal filings in these, then you'd want to replace it anyways. But if you're having Vanos issues and you wanted to try this first, you would have to replace this as a complete unit or swap them side to side to see if that's the cause of your problem before replacing just the Vanos units themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and put this aside. My pickup ring obviously comes right off, so I'll keep those together. And now I'm going to pull off the intake side. Okay, same thing, intake side comes off. There's my pickup ring for the intake side. All right, some good news here also is that both of these, both the valve and the pickup ring have the same part number. So these are interchangeable and you don't need to worry about its location. But if you are just replacing Vanos units, it's good to keep them in the same spot, just as a general rule of thumb. So let's get to these Vanos units. All right, before we pull these Vanos units out, I'm gonna take the camshaft sensors out. You need an E9. Just loosen up the one bolt holding these in place. I'm gonna take the intake and the exhaust out. Just makes it easier to sneak these out. These sensors are also interchangeable on the intake and the exhaust. They're just held in by pressure and a gasket. Screw back so I don't lose it. All right, now let's get these Vanos units out. So I'm gonna start with the exhaust. So you just sneak the chain off, tilt it towards you, and then take the Vanos unit out. Just as simple as that. So they should be labeled. There's a barcode on it, and it should say, this should be AUS. They usually say AUS, or actually this says EX right there. So this one says EX. Here's our Vanos unit. If you want to take a look at it, it's pretty cool. It's just a big spring technically, and then with oil pressure it can then change the camshaft position and then change the way that the timing works, advancing and retarding. So that is the exhaust side. All right, so now we're going to move on to the intake Vanos unit. There's a couple more steps you need to do. So one, I have a bungee set up, and I'm going to just hook the chain so the chain can't fall into the engine. You do have to take this plug off right here, and that is a 8mm Allen. So I'm going to take this plug off here because we have to take out a screw that holds one of the timing chain guides, or else the camshaft, the intake camshaft, is trapped between the two guides. So once that's removed, you do need a long T40 to come inside here. Let me show you what it looks like inside the engine. And we're hitting the screw right here, which is a T40 for this guide right here. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen that up. Now there's a ledge here, so this is kind of a long holder or long screw for that timing chain guide. So as I screw it out, it will rest on that ledge, but it's good to have a magnet handy so that you can grab it and not lose it inside the engine. All right, gonna go ahead and loosen this up. I'm gonna back this out. Okay, feel it's loose. Gently remove that. It should usually stay in place, and then grab it with a magnet and come out this way right here. Now, you're gonna have the valve cover off so you can grab it with your fingers as you're going in and out, just for that extra added safety so you don't drop it inside of the engine. All right, let's get that out of the way. That right there. So now I'm ready to remove the intake Vanos unit. I have some extra movement on my timing chain guide, and I can just loosen that for now and just turn it towards the passenger side and walk it right out. And then make sure to hold on to your chain, and that's why I have this bungee ready to hook my chain up so I don't lose it inside of my engine. And we've now removed both Vanos adjustment units. Look at that. This one does say in also, and the other one says exhaust. So intake and exhaust, I remember them. On older cars, they always used to say ein and aus. All right, pretty cool. So let's just see what we can see. Here's our timing chain. This is the exhaust side. Here's our guide. So you can check to see if you have any damage to your guide. You can actually lift this up. This does move. So you can peek down in here and just check the whole length of the guide as low as you can see it. Now when I install this, goes back here. This is actually where the tensioner goes here. Goes in through here. You can see the light, and that's what pushes on that guide right there. Right on the back side. You can even see the mark where it sits right there. So that's the exhaust side, and then here's the intake side. And I remember when we scoped this, we had a video that I scoped this just to verify that there was no damage to the timing chain guides. And you can really see that there's no damage when you just use a scope. And I'll put a link up to that video if you're interested in watching that one. And checking for that is very non-invasive. This just uses a borescope. So that's pretty much it for that. And you can see back here, we just have the camshaft timing jig located on the camshaft. That's the exhaust. Here's the intake side. Springs that I was talking about. See how I have that just hooked on the back spring. And these guys here are the intermediate levers. And these guys right here that are sitting on top of the springs, and these are your rockers, and there's some hydraulic lifters underneath the rockers there. So coming back to the front, we're going to go ahead and reinstall the Vanos units, and I'm going to show you how to do the full timing. All right, let's start going back together. I have the one that says EX on it for exhaust. I'm going to start with that one. Just going to catch it into the timing chain. and put it into place. Right, make sure your timing chain goes underneath your guide. Right, and you can see that I could turn it. I'm just going to turn it so that there's no slack. And we're going to pre-tension it in just a minute. We're going to do the intake side now. So I'm going to go ahead and release my chain holder. As you can see, the guide's going to sit across here. That's going to go there. Same thing, I'm just going to work it onto the chain and then walk it over to the correct position. Just as simple as that. All right, you can see both are in place. And just check my chain tension. Feels good, right? See, I have that same amount, a little bit of play there. And same thing here. Okay, then we're going to take the central valves right here, and we're going to just go ahead. It doesn't matter intake or exhaust. However, if you want to keep them in the same place, I think in general it's a good rule of thumb. These should screw on nice and easy. This pickup ring we can just let float there. We don't want to tighten this down right now too. If I tighten it too much, and I need to, let me show you, turn my ring, it will actually jam. Oh, actually it's spinning pretty good. But if you tighten that now too much and you turn this, you might not be able to set up your timing correctly. So here's something very important. These Vanos adjusters, I think I mentioned it last week, are infinitely variable within their range. That means wherever you put them, doesn't matter if I turn this 90 degrees and install it, it doesn't matter. It can figure it out. It figures it out using these pickup rings and the special tool that we need to tell it where those pickup rings are, and then it uses the camshaft position sensors to determine where and how to activate the Vanos system. So you don't have to worry about all the craziness like on an M54 engine with a bunch of springs and plates, and it's a disaster when you do an M54. I'll have to do a video on it. It's definitely way more complex of a timing than this particular engine, and most modern BMWs pretty much use this setup. I mean, if you have an N55 engine, this is almost the same thing, or an N52 N51, but the central bolts are not reusable. Right, so I want to make sure that that's snug, but I can go ahead and move these guys here. The next step is to pre-tension the timing chain. All right, so here's a cool trick. We have our tensioner here, and this is the special tool they give us in that kit that I would recommend. I don't usually use this tool, quite honestly. So what I normally do, and to pre-tension this chain, it is to 0.6 Newton meters. So basically, you're just touching the chain like so. You saw it move back that tiny bit, just to take up that slack for when you tighten everything down. Right, so you can use this one here using the original tensioner. You simply just, you can see that movement, install it, and you can see it actually pre-tensioned there for me. So I'll put it in a couple of screws, just I won't put it in all the way, right? And I shouldn't be able to turn this, and my slack is now taken up, and I'm done. That's probably more than 0.6 Newton meters. Or if you want to use the tool, you could actually tighten this piece right here to 0.6 Newton meters. So what you would do is take the special tool and slide it in, right? It feels like it's sloppy, but that's because the threads are further inside of this sleeved area. So once it catches, you're going to screw it in all the way. Make sure that you're backed out enough that you're not touching, right? You can see I still have some movement there. And you want to bottom it out. And then you're going to turn this part right here, the screw part, and basically until it's 0.6. So that is probably, again, might even be more than 0.6, just hand tight. Such a small amount, less than 1 Newton meter. And that's all in place, and that's held. So now I'm going to use a special tool since it's already in. Like I said, you can use the tensioner as a tip and trick. Now we're going to go ahead and install, we're not going to tighten these yet, we're going to install this guy right here. All right, so we have to make sure that our pickup rings are going to go into these holes. Now on the BMW tool, they have like this you can slide them out so that you can rotate the pickup rings, but this doesn't have that feature, so you just have to find the spot where it's supposed to sit and rotate them. You see how that's getting tight on me? Just like I said, the central bolt got a little bit too tight. I'm gonna back that off a bit so that they float a little bit more and I'm not tightening it just by turning it. Put that in place, find my hole on one, find the hole on the other, and then there we go. So that sits right up against the head right there, and I'm gonna get the 2 screws to lock those down. These are the 2 screws from the kit. Timing is so much fun, right? This is not hard, which is pretty awesome, right? Once you see how this is done, you realize that this is kind of a piece of cake. Just don't tell anyone, right? Keep it our secret, how easy it is to time an N20. These also are 9 Newton meters, but realistically just gently snugged. Gently snugged is really all you need. Just don't over tighten. All right, so with all of this in place, we're at TDC, we have our pin in, we're pre-tensioned, we have the intake and exhaust Vanos units on correctly, we have the sensors out for now. Our pickup wheels are in the proper location. It is time to torque down our central bolts. All right guys, this part is critical. You have to torque these correctly. So we have to do 55 Newton meters and then 55 torque angle. All right, so what is Newton meters versus torque angle? Newton meters is just the tension that we're setting when we tighten the bolt. So it's going to be 55, and that's what I'm going to set this to. Then the torque angle is exactly what it sounds like, right? From like a 90-degree angle, we have to go 55 degrees when we tighten it, and that is the correct tightening torque. So this actually uses torque and torque angle. So let me bring this down to 55. Okay, 55 Newton meters. I'm going to go ahead and do my first torque. Okay, that's my 55. I'll do the exhaust side now. That's my 55. Now, when you have this type of torque wrench, it automatically, you can switch it to torque angle. So angle 0 degrees, I need, or it has to sit still, it calibrates. I need not 90 degrees, I need 55 degrees. Now 90-degree angle is not hard if you mark it and you're just eyeballing 90 degrees. 55 degrees, that's a little bit harder, so I definitely recommend using a torque tool that has torque and torque angle. You don't have to buy Snap-on, but this really is a great tool. This is a 1/2-inch torque angle. There's a lot of great other tools out there too that do the same thing at definitely a better price. So I'm going to do torque angle. Back up a little bit so you can see, and it's really the same procedure. As I come up, it says 4 degrees, 6 degrees, 10 degrees, 17 degrees, and then it gives me my yellow warning, right? It's still going. Now what's nice about these, I can re-ratchet and it holds my degrees. So now I'm at 30, coming up to 55. So there's my 55. That is what's nice about these, is that when you click and lose your location, it knows where you were and there's no guesswork. Same thing on this one. I'm doing my 55 degree. There it is. Okay. Right where we had our open hole. So I'm going to go ahead and guide that in and get that started. Doesn't really matter if you do it before or after, because that just is your backside tension. It screws in fine. So we're going to put that in now. and tighten that up, and I will post what the torque spec is. I have to look it up because it's not part of my instructions. I believe it is 10 Newton meters, but I'm just gonna snug that down just like so, and then I'm gonna put the plug in. All right, so I have that plug for the timing chain tensioner access screw, and I will post the torque spec of this one too. I have to look it up because normally I torque it to the torque spec, the German torque spec of Gudentite. Next step, I'm going to take my tensioner tool out and install the actual tensioner. The timing chain tensioner is 80 Newton meters, just so you know. I'm not going to torque it, we're just going to keep going. All right, now we start taking the timing tools off. I have those two loose. Take the two bolts off for locating pickup rings in the right location. I'm going to take off the cam locks. Okay, I have my screws out. That's my cam holder here for my intake and exhaust. See how loose they are? Slide that baby out and that one out. Now we're going to rotate the engine over 2 times back to TDC. Don't forget to take your pin out. All right, so we'll take our pin out. I'm going to go ahead and rotate the engine over 2 times. Now remember, we're going to look for this barcode right here on both the intake and exhaust camshaft. And I have my pin ready. So as I slowly rotate the engine now and I approach TDC and I can watch my zip tie, I'm going to slide the TDC pin into place. There it is. Okay, TDC pin in place. There's the barcode. I hope they can get a better view. Here's that tool. And that should fall into place. Look at that, beautiful. And then on the other intake side, same thing. Right, so I should be able to screw that in. There's a little bit of movement because there is some spring tension, but that is perfect right there. Unlike before where our timing was actually off. Now the final step also is to make sure that your pickup rings are in the right location and nothing's moved on you. And that's going to be a matter of putting this tool back in and getting it to sit correctly. Look at that. And the pickup rings. Beautiful. Our timing is 100%. Yep, that's got a little bit of movement there. No tension. As you can see, there's no tension really on either one. These are all torqued. Our pickup rings are good. Your timing is now 100%. You're ready to go, and we just verified it by turning the engine over 2 times. Okay, a couple more quick steps that I don't want you to miss. Let's take these off. Let's take this off. We know our time is good. I'm going to take this off now. Right, you can see these guys right here. They're actually missing something. They're missing the O-ring. The O-ring often gets stuck inside. There it is right there. So I like to take the O-ring back out, lubricate it with oil, and there's one here that's stuck too. So if you're replacing these, a lot of times the mistake people make is they double gasket these and then it doesn't actually hit the pickup correctly. So you want to make sure that that gasket is not stuck up in there when you take these out and when you reinstall them. I'm sure these are 10 Newton meters also. Alright, push that into place. Take the other screw out. This was an E9. Put this sensor into place. And then go ahead and put the screws in. Alright everybody, that's it. That's how easy it is to replace the central valves and the Vanos adjusters on an N20 or an N26 with full timing, and you're ready to go. So next week's video, what I'm going to try to put together is replacing the eccentric shaft, which there's a cool trick that I learned just recently, so you don't have to use a special tool and it saves on time. When you're doing that Valvetronic motor, it is a good idea to replace the eccentric shaft at the same time, because where they mesh together is often a very big problem that you only find out after you have it all back together. Thank you everybody, and thank you subscribers. I really appreciate you, and everybody have a great day.